Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As we read yesterday, the Apostle John was very adamant of the fact that we are children of God. We've been called children of God, and in fact, we are children of God. But he also goes on to say that it has not yet been revealed what we will be like. He says in verse 2 of 1 John chapter 3, it says, "Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we'll be like him." And when you cross-reference Romans chapter 8, you find that uh, there is going to be a day in which there will be a revealing of the sons of God. It says in Romans 8, verse 19, "For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God." And so both with the Apostle Paul in Romans and then also the Apostle John in 1 John, we see that there is going to come a day in which it will be fully recognized who is actually the sons of God. Who is it that is actually the children of God? That it will be obvious in the resurrection of the righteous, as they inherit the new heavens and the new earth, will receive a glory, imperishable bodies. It'll just become very obvious that we were truly the children of God. But then we might ask the question, well, how is it that we can know who is a child of God even now, before the resurrection, before the revealing of the sons of God talked about in Romans chapter 8? And in 1 John, we have some key indicators, some evidence to whether or not a person truly is born of God. These are some characteristics of those who are born of God. And we can look at these to kind of gauge our lives and to compare our lives with, and to recognize that these are things that ought to be being manifested in our lives if we truly do call ourselves children of God. And one of the things is belief in Jesus as the Christ, believing Jesus as the Christ. This is found in chapter 5 of 1 John, in chapter 5 and verse 1, where it says, "Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and whoever loves the Father loves the child born of him." So he says, whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. And so belief in Jesus Christ is one of the main, most necessary things in being born of God. We must believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But also a person who is born of God is one who does not live in sin. And in our reading today, we read in 1 John chapter 3 and in verse 9, it says, "No one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin." So one of the things that come out of a life of being born of God is one who does not practice sin. Not that you don't occasionally slip up, mess up, but that a person who is born of God is one who's not going to be characterized by a sinful lifestyle or rebellious life against God. They're going to be wanting to pursue righteousness. They're going to have a desire for righteousness. They're going to want to turn away from evil because of the fact that they have been born of God. And then also, a person who is born of God is going to live a righteous life. In 1 John chapter 2 and verse 29, we read that if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. So practicing righteousness, that is doing what is right. Here in the context here, probably talking about doing what is right in regards to our fellow man, to our brothers and sisters in Christ. Everyone, it says, you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who practices righteousness is born of him. The idea here is that we would have the nature of God. God practices righteousness, and therefore if we're born of God, we should have the nature of God in us, and therefore bear forth righteousness as well. And then a person who is born of God lives a life of love. In 1 John chapter 4, in verse 7, we see this. It says, "Beloved, Let us love one another, for love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And so there's a direct tie between love and also being born of God. And it goes back to this idea of caring about within us the nature of God, because we're born of God, and the nature of God is love. God is love. And so if we are born of God, if he is our parent, if he is our father, then we should have his nature within us, and his nature is to love. And therefore, if we truly say that we are born of God, we should be loving other people. And then lastly, those who are born of God overcome the world. This is brought out in chapter 5 and verse 4 of 1 John, where it says, "For whatever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith." And so one of the key characteristics of a person who is born of God is a person who is overcoming the world through their faith in Jesus Christ. They're not being overtaken by the world. They're not being ruled by the world. They're not following after the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life talked about in 1 John chapter 2. But they're living a life that is God-oriented, and that is not self-oriented, and is other-oriented, that is having a desire for helping other people out is the idea. And so a person who is born of God is going to be one who is overcoming the world. So when you put all these things together, these are some characteristics of those who are born of God. And these are things that those who are born of God and who claim to be born of God should be expressing in their lives. For one, belief in Jesus, or believe that Jesus is the Messiah, not living in habitual sin, living a righteous life, living a life of love, and then also a life of overcoming the world more specifically. So these are some things that we can reflect on as we go through 1 John and kind of look at these things and say, these are good characteristics of those who claim to be children of God. These are things we should be expressing. These are types of attitudes and characteristics that we should have as we live with God's seed abiding in us, and as he lives his life and his nature through us. So these are some things we can reflect on as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.